Yeah, when you look at awake hours, and you combine time spent on phones, on computers, on TVs, it's actually 72% today. If you add that up in terms of years of your life, and that adds up to 17 years on average.
Hi, and welcome to the June podcast. I'm your host, Enzo, co-founder at June. In this show, I'm talking to the most inspiring product and growth leaders out there who will share their tips on how to launch and grow your SaaS. No fuss, no BS. I hope you enjoyed the show. Hello, Kenneth, and welcome to the podcast. How are things?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks. So excited to have you here.
Very excited as well. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So today we're going to talk about entrepreneurship, as usual on this podcast, building products, marketing, how we market them. But we're also going to talk about specific topics where you are an expert at, like mindfulness and art. And I'm really excited to be able to touch on these two things because we have never done it yet here.
Awesome. Can't wait.
So a few words about yourself. You're the founder and CEO of Opal, which is the number one screen time management app with over 1 million members globally. Prior to starting Opal, you founded and served as the CEO of an online marketplace called Artistry, which was acquired by Artnet in 2017, for which you became the CMO. You also worked as a product manager at Google, and you work on products including Maps, YouTube, and AdWords. And then you also had experience as the general manager at Bird, a global leader in micro mobility. So basically, foot scooters, they're mostly known for foot scooters in Paris. And your role was to expand the company internationally, especially in the French and Parisian markets. And you co-founded Stellar Base, which is a software studio and product consultancy. So I assume you really like to help other people out, and you've seen a lot of, ventures being built, and I'm sure this is going to intrigue a lot of people today. And something which I think is really, really cool about yourself is that, and really sets you apart, is that you wrote multiple times about your love for art and for supporting emerging visual artists because you think they're a great source of inspiration. And so I'm really keen also to touch on how you think, art and maybe tech can be reconciled.
Yeah, thanks, Enzo. I'm really glad to be here. And I have to say, I'm also a big fan of yours and the content you put out on product management. So really glad to see the impact you've had on the Paris tech scene. Really glad to be here.
My pleasure. So let's crack on. So let's talk a little bit about mindfulness and Opal, your current company. So you talk a few times on, about this topic. And I think this topic seems to resonate more and more in the fast-paced, digital world we're in. I'd like to know, when you meet someone who is a total beginner, what are kind of the, the early tips you share, or how you ground this topic with people usually, and how people can maybe start to think about mindfulness in their daily life if they're just at the very beginning?
That's a great question. I mean, mindfulness has a spiritual connotation, so that's not really what I'm going to talk about today. It also has a pragmatic, one, which is essentially it's about focusing your awareness and your attention to the present moment. And so it can mean standing still, like resting, but it also can mean, doing activity like work with full awareness. So some people call it, flow states. So you have this you can imagine the painter kind of, avidly sitting in front of his painting and in full motion, really focusing on what he's doing, or the chess player that's so focused on what he's doing that, even if a bomb comes off next door, he wouldn't budge. I think that to why, digital mindfulness and why does it resonate with people today? The thing is today, most people spend, like you and I, the majority of our lives staring at a screen. And when you're at a screen, you're usually not very mindful. You're thinking about, what's wrong, what I need to do. You can get sucked into rabbit holes, feeds, incoming messages, notifications quite often. It's a topic that is very important because it takes up so much of our time that if you want to have a life which is balanced, you need to pay attention to how you consume technology and how you spend time on screens. And so, practical tips. I mean, I always start, it's not one size fit all, but there's a few starters. One of them that's hard, but is a great starter is, no screens in the bedroom. Rest is important and productive. And when you're investing in your rest, you're investing in yourself. So that's a very easy, simple rule that's hard to implement. But also morning routines are very helpful. Trying to figure out what can you do in the morning that's not touching your phone, and that's also very challenging because most people have this, that phone as an alarm clock. And then another easy one, which we promote a lot through the app, is work hours. Just in this world where we're constantly, working remotely on a hybrid way, having a set structure in your day where you're going to be intentionally working and not being distracted. And so you can use, an app like Opal to enforce these restrictions and make sure that you are fully focused on your work while you're supposed to be working.
So you're saying maybe the thing that old people back the most from kind of mindfulness or just like a good life balance might be the screen. And this is kind of one of the reasons why you started with the screen, but there is just a lot more like habits in the morning and so on and so forth, right? Is it kind of the way you think about it, like almost like a pyramid, and the tipping point is the screen, but then there's just so many more things to unfold?
It's quite extraordinary that we spend all of this time in front of screens. And so I see it as a leverage to have impact on people's lives. It's not just the screens, it's kind of leverage to change habits in a positive way. And so, yeah, it starts with figuring out what you do on your phone, but it's also generally developing healthier habits in your relationship with technology that can start in the morning and in the evening, at nighttime, for example.
What is a good morning practice that people may adopt?
It could be very simple. I think, taking small steps. So, not having like a crazy idea of I'm going to run a marathon every morning, or I'm going to go and do something very ambitious, but just like opening the windows, making sure the first thing you do isn't touching your phone. Whatever replacement you can have is helpful. I like personally to just, get up when I can, open the windows, stretch. These are like, 15, 30 seconds that actually like put me in a good starting point to start my day before I go and reach out my phone. So yeah, that's just a simple tip.
Yeah, it's crazy that we've reached a point of humanity where we need to to stretch to kind of like get back 15 or 30 seconds for yourself in the morning, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, 75% of adults, that's one data I have, sleep with their phone in the US, sleep with their phones, typically next to their bed or in their bed. A lot of these people actually don't, turn off their phone or put it on the airplane mode. So yeah, it's a constant connection that we have, and it brings amazing things. I mean, I have a very optimistic view of technology. I think it has incredible upsides, but it also needs to be managed, and a lot of us haven't learned how to do that. So it's also pretty new. We have to start from zero. And we have just a few years of experience to make sure we fit this in our lives in a healthy way.
Yeah, and I'm kind of like wondering what's the role of the providers of these devices versus startup founders like you. Like, I know companies like Apple are getting better at this job, but at the beginning, they really created this platform where a lot of like social media apps were built and created a lot of addictions, which people are more and more aware of. Like, I mean, I know this is like getting a bit out of reach now, but what do you think is the role of this maybe large corporation in this whole discussion?
Yeah, I think it wasn't the intention, for the creators of the iPhone or Android phones to create an addictive device, but a lot has to do with the incentives of these companies. And at the end, that's really what matters. And we're in a space where the large OS makers or phone manufacturers are incentivized to actually make you spend a lot of time and have more and more dependence towards the devices. So it's actually, they've done a lot of great things, and we're super grateful. We're on iPhone. Opal is an iOS app. We use an API that was developed by Apple, and we're partners. And our sole focus is to build a product that helps people focus better. And I think that it's actually very smart for companies like Apple to open up to third-party developers that can be refocused on these use cases, because it's hard for them to do it directly.
Yeah, we're going to touch on that about this new API that's open in a couple of minutes. I'd like to hear, maybe before we get into more the entrepreneurship journey and the business topics, was there anything personal that brought you to to this product, to this company you built today? Maybe was there any turning point where you realized that technology could solve this problem?
Yeah, sure. I think there are two moments. I mean, the first one is when I first got started at Google in 2007, and I was sort of very early in my career. I understood that when you have gigantic amounts of data, as a company, you can probably pretty much outsmart individual behavior. And this was, time before privacy, before people were sort of really conscious of these things. But, we're just able to, with sufficient data, figure out a lot of stuff about people, whether a woman is pregnant or not, based on her, Google search queries, for example, or, predict a number of psychological traits of individuals. And so I became quite aware of that power, that you have with data. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if like people individually could also have that power using their own data. So that's something that's been with me for a long time. But personally, yeah, I mean, I've been a founder, as you mentioned. I started the first company. The journey is a grind. I was overwhelmed, overstimulated. Sometimes I reached points where my personal battery was critically low. And, when these moments happen, you realize that you are unable to make good decisions, that you make decisions you regret. And so I end up, figuring out like what is it that I can do to find better balance. And that has been a long journey to figure out, in particular, like that screen time was a big part of it, and how I could actually change my screen time habits would lead to a healthier outcome for myself, and also just better decisions that I would make as a professional. And so that's a bit the journey that lasted for over 12, 13 years, that led me to consider Opal. And really, frankly, the way I look at the world today, I think screen time is the new diet, in the sense that, today most people are aware of what they eat, that some things are good for them, some things are bad for them. It's not all the same. Like some things are good for some people, but bad for others. And that what you eat is directly tied to your sense of well-being, to your health, and also to your productivity. I think that screen time is this new diet, in the sense that in the next few years, people will become just as aware of what they eat as they are aware of what they consume on screens. I mentioned earlier, 3/4 basically of your life spent on screens. This is actually going to go just in one direction. We'll spend more and more time. We'll be more and more intertwined with technology, and so we have to ask ourselves, what is good, what is bad, what kind of rules I want to put for myself. What is a good diet, essentially. And so this is really how I see the world today, and the product that I built is an outcome of this vision of the world.
You said 3/4 of our lives is spent on the device.
Yeah, when you look at awake hours, and you combine time spent on phones, on computers, on TVs, the average American adult is actually 72% today. Of an average adult, and that's an average. So, if you look at people working in tech, or, let's say students, for example, this is likely to be much higher. We spend very few times not looking at a screen today.
And I've never seen this number. It's scary.
Yeah, another interesting number is if you add up the time that you spend, awake, that you spend just in front of a smartphone. So it's, over 4 hours a day today, and you add that, basically there's, if you look at like awake hours, you take 8 hours to sleep, basically, or times you should be sleeping. So that leaves 16 hours. So, it's a very high percentage of your day, 4 out of 16, right, that you're going to spend in front of a smartphone. And if you add that up in terms of years of your life, and that adds up to 17 years on average, staring at a phone. So that's just one interesting data point, also to put things into perspective, and that often triggers people to say, okay, actually, I should be paying attention to this. I spend all this time and effort figuring out how to be more productive, or use the right tools. With you on the product side, figuring out the right dashboards, but maybe not enough time figuring out how I actually spend my 17 years of my life.
Yeah, I mean, this one is, that's so correct. I think one of the things we're fighting is for the people to get some time back from their analysis. But the problem we've seen is that since we work with a lot of founders and product managers, if they save time somewhere, they're going to spend it elsewhere. So you have this kind of forever expendable resource time, and if people save time from their phone, I hope they don't, waste it on video games, or, whatever other device?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I don't think necessarily it's just saving time is a goal. It is great, but it's more making sure that you're intentional about the time you use your devices, and generally in what you do in life. What I'm trying to avoid is that feeling you get, after you've scrolled for a long time and you regret and you're like, this is not what I should be doing. I want to do something else. And that's really like what we're after. But, if you want to spend time, and you're happy about like seeing a great show, connecting with your friends on social media, all these things can be really net positive. It's all about like how you actually are intentional or not about the time.
Completely agree on this one. It takes a lot. It's harder to do than to say. What's the responsibilities of companies in this schema, right? Because Opal is a B2C app, right? You're going directly to the pocket of the consumer on iPhone. Companies could be promoting this kind of life balance, mindfulness, or however we call that, digital detox. Opal could be a B2B product, right? Or could be a B2B2C product. What's your why wasn't that the case for you? Do you think this is
Yeah, maybe I'll stop, to explain just a little bit like how Opal solves this problem, because we've talked about it a bit, but so we're, first of all, a screen time management app, on iOS, and the mission of the company is to help people focus better. And specifically how we help people focus better. Well, there's mainly two parts. First, we basically allow you to measure your focus, not just measure the amount of time, as we were saying, that you spend on your devices, but also the quality of that time and how focused you've been during that time. And second, we also help you, manage and structure your days. For example, like your work hours, time off, with app restrictions and other rules that will actually help you stay focused on what you want to do, and all wrapped into UI that makes the experience rewarding. So that's really what Opal is today. And you're right, it's a consumer product. You download it on the App Store today, and we have a subscription business model. We see people using it, as a daily companion. Mostly sits in the background. For example, during your work hours, you'll say, I want to avoid going on social media or news, so I can have a less interrupted day and maybe even shorten my work day and be more efficient. Or in the mornings, as we're mentioning with routines, or nighttime, to avoid other distractions. For example, be focused while I'm at the gym or at the dinner table with my family, so I'm not checking other things. And one of the ways we measure the impact we have is definitely time saved. So we've saved over 50 million hours of screen time from less screen time of our customers, but also people are feeling more productive and feeling better, thanks to the app. And so really it starts with this. It is a consumer first application that people decide to intentionally put on their phone to change the way they interact with technology. But I think companies do have a big role to play. I think it will come slightly later, but the more we can prove the impact we're having on people's sense of well-being and people's sense of productivity, the more we believe that companies will be willing to invest in our solution to offer to their employees. We've seen some of it happen opportunistically right now, and I think it will become a much bigger part of our product and our company journey in a following phase in the coming 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. So you're starting with the end user, proving the value, and then going upstream, maybe to other distribution channels like companies or whatever, right?
Absolutely. Companies, colleges, potentially insurance companies. I think the more we can prove, the outcome on the well-being side and on the productivity side, and we're planning to invest on that as well, the easier it'll be for organizations, big and small, to want to invest in this space. And I'm, definitely convinced, in our customers, and you mentioned, 1 million people today, are interested and convinced in the value proposition. But I think it takes a little bit more time, to kind of establish that as a truth. Meditation is interesting. It took, 10 years basically from the beginning of adoption of apps like Calm and Headspace to companies willing to pay for it. And so I think a similar journey is happening in screen time.
So I'd love to dive into the things that are taking time to change, and this kind of like hard to move things in general. So being a founder is not an easy task. Far from that. Lots of ups and downs. I'd love to hear with maybe your latest venture with Opal. if there was any major learning that you got from it that didn't occur before. And also, then I would love to hear what do you think is especially hard about building this company? Maybe the market is not there yet. Maybe it seems like it's your first mass market consumer app. I'm sure it's very hard to build such a product. Could you share with us a little bit?
We're blessed in the sense that I think we're building in a market where there's a lot of awareness of the problem. So most people today, that you would go and talk to, if you were to say, are you satisfied with how you use your phone, for example, most people would say no. So there's a lot of awareness on the problem. The solution, though, pioneered by Apple, frankly, that's launched Screen Time, it basically educated people on the problem. Everybody's aware of it, but it doesn't really work for most people. And so we're introducing a different kind of solution, and that takes time for people to understand it and for people to really use it. And so that's, I guess, one of the challenges of this market, but it's working really well currently, and it's getting easier and easier as time goes by. As a product, as a founder in general, I think I face the same issues as most founders do. What do you focus on? Sometimes it's very difficult. How do you maintain your energy levels? I think it's also really connected. I became a father in the product journey as well, and in the startup journey. So how to manage, sort of the personal family life and professional ambition and life. Those are all topics that I think a lot of founders deal with. And I find it super interesting that actually I'm working on something which is building a solution as well for me, personally. I have to raise the bar consistently on like how I use my time, how I use my energy, and it's never perfect. I think one thing that is very clear, is you always fail. It always happens. Like you will always get to a point where I like to think, critically low battery level, right? Like the point where you have no more energy, where you outstretch yourself, you have too many priorities, and that's the point where you make bad decisions. That's the point where you make mistakes. So these moments happen. I think the goal is not to say like I'm not going to have them at all anymore, but more like how does it become less frequent? And I think there's two things you can do. First, you can learn to be mindful and flag it before they come up. You can, rest and be more mindful about like, okay, this is the moment where I need to rest. Otherwise, I'm going to go in that red zone, right? Which is going to take longer to actually fix. And the second is you can prevent it, right? And so Opal is really in that prevention side, developing healthier habits, getting feedback, figuring out like, what is draining my battery, what is bringing me more energy. I got a lot better actually at that, like with experience, I think, and certainly not perfect at all, but this is something that I've made a lot of progress on.
Yeah, I guess there could be worse product to dog food than a product that is meant to make you happy. I always think about my friends at Uber that have to dog food Uber Eats and eat kind of greasy food every day. Good in the beginning, but after some time, you get, I'm not sure it's very healthy for you.
No, definitely. Like we're very lucky in that sense, and it's also like DNA of everybody in the team uses the product, and it's a consistent strive to make it better.
Was there, out of all the red zones you mentioned, was there any very hardship you overcame that you would be willing to share with us?
Yeah, in my previous company, I can think of, we basically went through the journey of receiving a sort of life-changing term sheet for an acquisition of my previous company, negotiating for 6 months, a contract of like 77 pages, if I remember correctly, signing the contract. And on the day that the wire was supposed to come in to close the deal, the wire not coming, and then the deal falling through. For step three, kind of outside of our control. Yeah, that was a low point because destroyed the company, destroyed the employee morale and like kind of founders, my morale as well. And it was very hard to get back up from it. And I think that one thing that I learned that process, apart from like smaller things, tactical things of like how does M&A work and how do you approach this? But it's also, focusing more on longer term relationships. And because one thing that came out of this is, I'm still really close friends with my co-founder and invested in his 2 companies now and kept a lot of great relationships throughout that process. And we were able to to find a positive exit as well after that, because I decided, okay, like I want to create long-term relationships with these people, and that's really helpful to kind of give perspective and go through the hard times.
Thanks for sharing. And your former co-founder, I think, is it Maxime or someone?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Maxime, who founded Jor, he got acquired by Alan, starting something new now.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard he's been promoting June. He's been super kind and promoting us at the Alan 9. So never met him, but heard great things about him.
Might be a great future guest for your podcast when he launches a new product.
Oh yeah, I heard great things about him. I'd like to talk a bit about the timing. So you just touched on timing. Funny enough, you just mentioned that you had this deal coming through, which collapsed. With Opal, it's all about timing, right? Like this market being educated and Apple promoting that, of course, and people realizing, the importance of spending time on their device. Recently, you were GM at Bird, and recently, I think 19 days ago, the food scooter were removed from Paris. And so obviously it was a good time for you to be GM at that time there. It's harder to be a GM, at least in Paris, for Bird right now. I'm not sure if they're even there. There are other companies. Timing is really important. I love to hear how you think about it. Do you think it's important to be ahead of the wave? Do you think you need to be when the wave hits? What's your experience there?
No, if I may, I think for Bird, it wasn't about timing. I'm happy to talk about timing, but I think for Bird, it's a bit of a different problem here. Like to me, Bird is the story of a good player that played the wrong game.
Okay.
What I mean by that is, it's like when you have a great basketball player that's trying to compete in a rugby match. So in the sense that people thought that Bird was a software and hardware business, and I think people who started the business as well as people who worked in it, including myself. But actually, we found out that Bird was a private public partnership business. So closer to a JC Deco than an Apple, in my opinion, personally. And so that's something that's very hard to overcome, where like the culture and the inception of the business is sort of in the wrong market, frankly. But there were lots of great players there and amazing people that I met. But I think that was really the issue. It wasn't so much of a timing issue, more a question of figuring out the right market that you're in, and then building the right culture and the right team to go after that market. The story of Opal is really interesting. Like we got started in 2020. There was no API back then. So what this means is we actually got started with a very hacky VPN initially. That we found a way to essentially analyze through a VPN the connectivity of your device, and then deduce which apps you were using and how long, and then also be able to block your connectivity of specific apps. That worked for a while, sort of. It was a good proof of concept, sort of MVP, and we got some traction from it. For 2 years and a half, that was the technology, and it wasn't very reliable. And it wasn't mass market. Like very few people actually want a VPN that kind of does those things. Sometimes it breaks. It's not great. And then late last year, we got access to an API. We also spent a lot of time talking to Apple, and as much as we could, request specifics on and also show a use case for the API. And we were lucky to be the first to be able to use this API and put it to market with iOS 16 last year. And definitely that was the right timing. Would I have done things differently? No, because I think that, you make a bet and I think as a founder, I decided that this was a major topic that people will become more and more mindful of their screen time, that this will become bigger and bigger. And that I'm sort of willing to stay the course. And so for 2 years and a half, it was so very hard to build the product because the tech wasn't there. And in the last year, it's become a lot easier, and we've got phenomenal growth. But you make a bet and you stick to it.
And in that case, I guess I'm trying to understand exactly what that API has changed for us, but for you, sorry. But basically, it was basically Apple making a clear commitment that they would want startups like yours to grow and expand and be able to build, right? So
Yeah, I think that three things. I mean,
a
just
partner relation, sorry, right?
there's that. There's just basically reliability. It just works much better. We have access to real data coming directly from the API. It doesn't break as often. So that's one, just like much more reliable. The second one is it's much easier to get people to say yes to permissions from an API within the Apple ecosystem with privacy in mind than to get to install a third-party VPN. That's something that is much easier to do in the onboarding. And the third aspect is what you mentioned is clearly, it makes our job a lot easier to know that, in the long run, this is Apple's strategy and also likely be Google's strategy to say, we're not the best at doing this. We're going to help others like Opal do it, and we can consistently prove that we're going to do it really well, so that we can build a category defining and generational business in the next 10 years.
I want to touch on one last thing about your entrepreneurial journey, or your the sides of your personality, which is product marketing at Google. What has it brought you? What is it like to market product at Google, and what do you think is applicable to your journey so far?
Yeah, I think it was 2007, smaller company. It was definitely late stage startup by then, but I learned a ton on the product side. A/B testing, surveys, statistical significance. I got a chance to work with amazing product people and statisticians and economists as well at the time. So it gave me a lot of just practical experience on a huge amounts of data to understand how to make decisions. And then on the marketing side, like people with really big ideas, very talented people who end up in this program that I was a part of, are now like PMs in tech and CMOs of Fortune 500 companies and or startup founders. So also just a great network of people to tap into. I think it was an interesting time to do that. And also I think people who were just generally at the time really genuinely mission driven. And I know it sounds crazy because Google is like this massive corporation, and at the time, like people really understood the values. There was a very optimistic view of technology, organizing the world's information, making it universally accessible and useful. Sort of everybody knew that. And I think that people were sort of driven by that and actually joined the company for those reasons. I also learned that you can actually get together with people who are really passionate about a vision of the world and make it happen. And so I think that was very foundational, in my experience. I think that later I had this sort of hints at the time of the downsides of that, and the power of data that large companies could use. But I would say that consciousness really redeveloped later, and I would get nothing from that experience. I just think it's something that I look back to now and say, okay, we weren't aware of this at the time, but now it's obvious, right? And the world is often works in these ways where you look back and it's obvious, and when you're living through it, it's not as much.
And so, is there some specific artifact that you brought back? So that's the way you operate the company right now, right? With a very mission-driven, vision-driven approach to it. Or
I think it's that's probably like what I care about a lot, and also make sure that the people in the team share this. I think it's important to care a lot about the impact that you want in the world, or that you want your product or your driven to have, your mission to have. Our mission is to help people focus better, help humans focus better each day. And we have this mission, this notion of impact. I want to help 1 billion people focus better each day, and that's quite ambitious. And our next challenge, right? I think we're doing well, and we're still pretty niche, and the business is going well. But how do we translate that into a mass market product that can really help millions of people and 1 billion people? that's going to be the challenge in the next coming years.
So for the people that don't really operate like that, for the companies that don't really operate like that, could you maybe explain what it translates to? What's happening in a company like Opal when you do that?
The way
Are they working? Is it like you open many doors to go to the vision, like more energy, more purpose? People like feel happier. What's happening there?
I think, I see the Opal journey as three phases. We've just completed phase one, which was about, proving we could build a product that helps people, that people are willing to pay for our products, because we're a subscription business. So that's very important. Proving we can acquire customers in a cost-efficient, profitable way, and at scale. And so that took us, to our first millions in ARR, and with a high retention product that people use mostly every day, and high impact. Phase two, is how do we expand our scale from, today, actually right now we're at 100,000 daily actives, right? And we have an ocean of activity, it's our own, but essentially every day we're helping 100,000 people focus better, right? And that's tiny in terms of the issue, which concerns billions of people. So how do we actually scale our impact? And that means, concretely, it means that we're going to be less focused on short-term conversion and more focused on activation and retention, including of free customers. And that's a hard balance to reach, because you can convert people right away and focus on subscribers. That's a playbook that exists. And then you can create a free product and figure out how to monetize later. That's another playbook that exists. But I think in between, it's harder. There's companies that do it really, really well. Duolingo is, of course, a very successful business that has millions of people that use it for free, will never pay anything and are very happy about it, and then is able to be a massively profitable business. And so that's the switch that we're looking to make between phase one and phase two, and optimize for impact. So that's the main thing, is figuring out which metrics we want to move to have that impact, and have a clear view of that, and then make sure everyone in the team is focused on these metrics.
And I could get a sense of that earlier when you said the number of hours that were saved from watching your screen. I could tell that you really had this value-based metric, really for people's life, not just number of time the app was open or something like that.
Yeah, it's a tangible metric that people relate to, and that it gives us a good sense of impact. So that's something we track.
It's a good one. Let's talk a little bit about art. We have a couple of minutes left. You have worked in the art industry. You are involved into the art world. I'd love to hear a bit your thoughts about the intersection of tech and art. Why and how do you think one or the other could get some inspiration from the other one? What kind of art are you looking at these days, maybe, to get your inspiration?
No, I'm glad to talk about it. I don't get to talk about it a lot, but yeah, it's something I love. I came to art as an outsider. My first business was arts and collectibles related. But I think fundamentally, artists are people who see the world in a unique way. They sort of see beauty where others don't see anything, and they translate that into their work through a painting, a picture, whatever their practice is. There are people also who have devotion to their work, so it's really a practice you do every day. There's this great quote by a photographer named Chuck Close, who says, inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us show up and just get to work. So it's, I think art has this, people have an idealized version of it, but really it's devotion. It's every day you create your craft and you make it happen. And so artists are really inspiring in that way, especially as an entrepreneur, because I see a lot of traits between artists and entrepreneurship, right? I think entrepreneurs also see the world in a unique way. They see some things others don't. They translate that into a product that others can use. They also have devotion to their work. I think, sure, entrepreneurs and some entrepreneurs are, very focused on outcomes, like how much money or that you're going to make. But I think the true visionary founders and entrepreneurs, they're actually mostly focused on their practice, and like they actually truly enjoy what they do, and they make a difference in that way. And so I see the relationship between artists and founders and entrepreneurs in that way. And so you get a lot of inspiration from artists, looking at artists' work.
Is there some okay, two questions for you. Is there some artists you want to mention that really inspire you recently? Let's start with this one.
I have to say I haven't spent enough time, I would say, looking at art recently. But there's a topic that I'm super interested in, which is with generative AI becoming super mass market and so high quality. I think it's pushing the boundaries of art and challenging artists in that, the same way that when photography came about, artists had to think about like, okay, what is art? If you can simply snap a picture and make a beautiful representation of reality, we need to make something different, right? So we're going to make, something more abstract, for example. And so I think with Gen AI, it's a big challenge to art and artists. And there's just, for example, I saw a great show by a less emerging but sort of more established artist called Thomas Demands, originally German, living in the US. He had a show in Paris. He's an amazing artist that basically challenges what is real, and he essentially like makes these real life cardboard and paper hyper realistic scenes that he takes pictures of. And so what you're looking at is the picture of this kind of paper and cardboard representation of, for example, one of the famous ones, like the Oval Office, And so when you first look at it, you think it's a picture of the Oval Office. And then you take a second look at it and you're like, actually, no, there's something wrong. The light, maybe, I'm not sure. But it has this strangeness that's hard to pinpoint. But it's super interesting because he asked the question of like, what is real? Like, is a picture real? How? And so I think is very relevant today. And also went to a show by a young curator in Paris called Lena Crush, and she had a number of like 3D and AI generated like photorealistic portraits. And it was amazing to see that it was like very, very hard to see that they were not real. It's really sort of this, so realistic that you could think it was like fashion photography, but no, it was actually fully fabricated. People don't exist, and you see some of that online, on Twitter or whatever, of people creating their own artwork, but artists are actually taking it to the next level and making something that's even more confusing, even more realistic, and so I think it asks the question of like, what is real. So I find that super interesting.
That's a fantastic topic that actually ties really well with the purpose of your company and like, and screens and like what's real when you're in screens instead of being with your family and all this stuff, right? And screen is real because it's real people, it's real work, whatever, but can be very fake at the same time. So I think that's a good wrap up, man. My brother is an artist. And when I started into the startup world, I got into Lean Startup like many people. And so there is this book I always wanted to write for him called The Lean Startup for Artists. Do you
Let's do it.
Do you think it's a good idea?
Yeah, you should definitely do it. That's great. I can help. I want to help. So let me know. Let's do it.
I'm writing another book right now, but maybe the next one.
Okay. Awesome.
So in your opinion, there is similarities. You think like startups and artists are, solving problems. They can iterate, whatever. There is. You think similar?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think you speak a different language, but fundamentally, these are people who see the world in a different way, are creating something new, and are very similar. So I think definitely there's exchanges to be made and learnings on both sides. So I think it's excellent. It's an excellent idea.
I'll ping you when I start.
All right, let's do it.
Last question. about the future. Is there any exciting project goals at your horizon for the future? How do you plan to continue making an impact? I mean, I guess you talk about the multiple phase plan of the company.
Yeah.
Is it what we look forward right now?
Yeah, I think that we're going to simplify the experience a lot. What does an app look like that most people can use that just helps them focus better, that gives them some feedback on their focus and helps them improve day to day? And I think we haven't yet answered that question. And we'll see Opal become, get in the hands of a lot more people in the coming months and years. We're also, mostly hidden behind paywall right now, and we want to make a lot more accessible for free. And so that's quite exciting because we can get a lot more people to experience the app.
That is exciting. I can't wait to catch up with you on the podcast in like a year or two and see where you're at.
Cool. Thanks, man. Great talking to you.
Likewise, we're at the end. Thank you so much for coming. I'll reference what you discussed today. If people want to follow up with you or just stay updated, where should they go?
Yeah, I think Twitter is great. I'm at K Schlenker. Schlenker is my last name. And Twitter is perfect.
Awesome. I'll share the link. Thank you so much, man. A good one. Thank you for listening to the June podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star rating and subscribe. This episode is powered by June. For a better way to do product analytics, visit june.so.